So welcome everybody. I'll just sort of start us off because we haven't got a load of time and I want to get on to the main event as soon as possible. So welcome everybody to our latest EX Insights webinar, Expert Insights webinar with Michael Leckie, who Katie will introduce you to in just a sec. We're absolutely delighted you could join us today. You'll see the webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again if you want to kind of take those nuggets away. Joined by my colleague Lee from the EX Space. Hi, Lee. And also Katie, who's going to be doing the hosting duties today. Katie's given me a little bit of a break from hosting because I'm just getting over a bout of COVID. So I'm still a little bit croaky and I've still got a little bit of a cough. So Katie's going to kind of host the webinar today. But yeah, welcome to the webinar. As I've mentioned, we run a company called the EX Space, which is a membership-based learning community. A couple of members are on here already, so hopefully you guys will endorse us to your colleagues on here. And yeah, we're building a community of like-minded people who are passionate about the world of work and who want to make a difference. And let's face it, it's been a tough year this year, right? We are seeing budgets being frozen and we are seeing people being laid off, and our jobs got harder, if that was possible. And I think, having a community like this is just so powerful at times like these, just to be able to, just speak to other people that are going through the same things you're going through, so you don't feel like you're going mad, or you can kick ideas around with other people. I just think in times like these, there is such power in a community like this. And what we found with the EX Space community and the People Lab community is that the people that kind of join this community are really good people. They're generous, as I'm sure you all are. We swap ideas, we collaborate, we share. We are here for each other. So I just want to put that out there and say, if you're sat there and feeling a little bit wobbly at the end of the year after a tough year, as I know a lot of people are, 'cause I've had conversations the last few weeks with all sorts of people on this subject, we're here for you. So just get in touch and yeah, let's be here for each other. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Katie to kick off proceedings today. I've probably forgotten to say loads of things I'm supposed to say. Katie, remind me now. So Katie, I'm going to hand over to you. I can feel my throat is about to give up any minute. So hand it over to you, Katie.
No worries. Thanks, Emma. No, I don't think you've forgotten anything, but no doubt I'll probably forget something now as well. So as Emma has mentioned, we're absolutely delighted to have Michael Leckie with us today, author of the fantastic book here, The Heart of Transformation, published by Kogan Page. So a little bit about Michael before I hand over to Michael. So Michael brings over 30 years of leadership and consulting experience to his role in driving transformation in a digital world. He believes that digital transformation is a combination of the human and the technological, and that our organizations can only make the changes needed to thrive through addressing both the social and technical systems of which they are made. So I have very recently finished reading this book, actually, and I would say it's a really useful tool, really, for anybody that's going through change or transformation, and let's face it, who isn't at the moment. And one of the things I really loved about this book, Michael, is the way, as you address each of those sort of big key topics, you ask a number of really big questions at the end, almost like a coaching session throughout reading the book, which I just think is fantastic. If people are really struggling, to just take that time to ask themselves and those around them those big questions to kind of help guide them through that journey. But I don't want to tread on your toes and share any of those secrets. So I'm going to do no more talking. I'm going to hand you over to Michael, who's going to share a little bit more about his take on change and transformation and making it human-centered. So I will pass over now. Thank you, Michael.
Wow, thank you, Katie. That was lovely. And I appreciate your feedback. I mean, that was really the intention as people who know me, and I see some on the screen there that I know from earlier. Something being useful is actually kind of very, very high praise for me, and that was the intent, is to give something that people can actually work with and do something with. I guess there's a lot of there's so much information out there. As a friend of mine says, there's a lot of TBU, true but useless. So tried to share something that hopefully was relatively true as well as making it useful. So I appreciate that. So here's what I'm going to do, and what I love to do is I love to do more of the Q&A type of approach to things. But when I talked to Katie and the team there, they said let's go ahead and just kind of maybe give a brief download though of some of the basic tenets of where you're coming from. So what I thought I would do is share. I'll probably take 15-20 minutes most here and share some slides with you and kind of walk through what I call the 7 myths or the humbugs of digital transformation. Just let me go ahead and get those up on the screen, and then when we're done with that, we'll take it off. But give me just a moment to get through my technical side of it here and pop it up. All right, Katie, is everyone able to see the screen, and are you seeing the regular version or the presentation version?
I think this is the sort of regular version. We haven't got quite the full screen that we. That's the one.
That's it.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I work. One of the things I haven't been able to figure out all through making the move to being mostly out of a home office is I actually have 3 monitors, and no matter what I do, trying to put Microsoft PowerPoint on the monitor I want to look at, so I'm not doing this when I'm talking on a video is really difficult, but I think I know this well enough. We don't have to worry about it. So again, let me just dig in real quick, and I'm not going to be checking the chat right now, but if Katie, if a question comes up in the midst of this that you'd like to pause, interrupt me and ask a question, feel free to interrupt away. I won't be upset by that at all. But yeah, my slide over really talking about change again. I guess I start with that because I think we've talked about change really poorly in the past. And this comes home to me time and time again. I was meeting with a client organization yesterday that had reached out. They're coming together of a number of companies, a fairly large medical sciences company now. And they would love to be able to have a new way of managing change where the leadership team can just hire the expertise and then have it done. And talking to them about their personal role in change has been the biggest eye opener. Because I think that we believe that we can, quote unquote, manage change like we've managed everything else. Whereas actually change is really personal and really individual. And the things that we are missing are individual human things. They're not systemic things. So let me talk to you a little bit about that. And I start out with this image. For those of you, especially for me growing up in the United States, every year as a kid, it was so excited when The Wizard of Oz came on TV. This is always the show that I wanted to watch. And what's interesting and why I bring this image up and share this story is that if you read the original book that came out in, I guess, 1900 now, the original book talks about when the explorers there, the adventurers, get to the Emerald City. One of the things they're asked to do is they're asked to put on these emerald goggles. And I have my version of them here. I'm just going to slide them on. So they're asked to put on these goggles. In fact, when they get to the Emerald City, these goggles are locked onto their head. And it's a very, clear reason for doing this. It's because the Emerald City itself is so dazzling and beautiful that if you didn't have these special goggles to help you cope with it, you could just go blind or go mad from how beautiful it is. And of course, none of this is a lie. It's as the wizard says later on, it's one of his humbugs, one of his little deceits and stories. There's nothing special about the Emerald City other than that you're looking at it through green glasses. And that's what makes it emerald. And the reason I share that is because I think that we have a set of emerald glasses around change and how we look at change. And so what I'd like to do is specifically look at over the next 10 or 15 minutes here now, share with you what I think are those 7 humbugs, if you will. And just to define that, term, because it's kind of a strange old-fashioned term, it's something designed to deceive and mislead. And here's what's interesting to me about these humbugs around change and transformation, or these myths, if you want to call them that, is that I don't think they're intentionally designed that way, but how most of our organizations and most consulting firms are set up to deal with change is designed with these false assumptions in mind. And so I think it's really critical that we just take a look at what those are and have an awareness of them. So I'm going to walk through them, and I'm going to share all 7 with you right up front here. And then I'm going to walk through them one at a time. And what you'll see on each slide is kind of my discussion of what this myth or this humbug is and what I believe the truth is. There's also some questions there. And sometimes when I'm working with leadership organizations, in fact, I'll be working with one in a couple of weeks where we'll do something similar. I'll have a similar conversation with them, but we'll spend a few hours kind of digging into each of these and asking some questions. So you'll see some of the questions I ask them on the screen as we go by, although I won't be having that discussion with you today since we're not an intact organization, but they are good questions to be thinking about, and we will send them out to you afterwards so you have these slides, so don't worry about that if you're taking notes. So let me just walk through real quick, and then we can have whatever discussion is most valuable to you. But the first one is that change management is about process, technology, and systems. And we often hear that this is the case. It's technology driven. It's especially digital transformation driven by digital technology. And digital transformation, if we're being honest, is just transformation. We're just doing it in a digital context, or it's spurred on by advances in technology and digital technology. But the truth is, it's not about those things, that it's human first. And first is the important word here, because systems, processes, technology, all of those things have changed, are changing, might need to continue to change and adapt to what technology is creating. But it is never the technology system that's the problem. When I talk to organizations having trouble making changes happen, it's not that they can't get the tech is there. And it's not that they can't articulate the processes are there. It's getting people to believe in or embrace those things, which is the problem. Often that's just called resistance, or that's the cultural resistance, or whatever they want to label it. But what it is people engaging with this question about what we've asked them to change, and engaging with it not always in a completely open and embracing way. And so when we're going to deal with change, we have to deal with human beings first. And we really can't deal with them as a system. We have to deal with them as individuals and groups of small groups. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The second humbug there is that change leadership means creating the path and ensuring people stay on it. For years, for me, that's what leadership was. I thought about. You were the person who knew the most and had the information, and you told everyone, here's the path, and you just made sure they walked down that path effectively, and you were a good leader. But the fact of the matter is that model doesn't work anymore, and not in how fast the world around us changes. We can't keep up. We can't know enough, and we can't articulate enough. By the time we articulate that path, we need to have moved down it. And so what I like to say is that change is not about following that magical yellow brick road. It's about cultivating those brick layers that are needed to build the road. People have to know what destination we're getting to, but how they get there has to be something that they can build and change over time. And if we are not open to that, if we're not comfortable with that, if we haven't let go of that control, we're going to have a hard time getting change, because people are still just going to be doing what we tell them to do, which is likely to be past its sell-by date by the time they start working on it. And it's really difficult for us, of leaders of any organization, especially of any size, to know enough about the path everyone should walk on, again, because the destination and how we get there and the tools to get there are changing so quickly. So number two, that change leadership means staying on the path and keeping people on it, as opposed to cultivating those brick layers. Humbug number three, that a leader's job is to articulate change, but the followers make the changes. This one may sound kind of like the last one. Aren't you saying the same thing again? Well, what I was saying in the last one is we need to cultivate those bricklayers who can build the path. But what I'm talking about now here is the fundamental role of the leader. And here's the issue. The fundamental role of the leader has changed. And if there is any one thing that is most challenging for the organizations I work with every day, who bring me in to help them build transformation and change as a capability, is that the leadership wants somebody else to change. And generally that's what change is all about. It's a bunch of people in a room saying, where does everybody else have to do something different? But rarely is it about them. And it's not that they're the ones maybe making the changes. Perhaps the change that we're rolling out is a system and technology driven one that most of our people will use, but you in your role as a manager aren't using that technology. That's okay. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is that you need to show the way of making change, which is being wrong about things, being unsure, not knowing, and discussing that until you figure it out. It's showing your learning process, not stepping in from a place of knowledge and security, but stepping in from a place of, I don't know. And this is not something that leaders are good at. The problem is that unless we can create the psychological safety in our organizations for them to muck around and to make mistakes and be wrong, they're not going to. And they're not going to do it because we tell them to. We can put up as many fail fast posters as we want until we talk about our failures, our mistakes, and where we had to pivot and learn. No one else is going to. A friend of mine, David Meredith, says that oftentimes when he hears people talking about resistance to change, what he tells them is, no, what you're seeing is engagement with change. You just don't like the way they're engaging yet, and they haven't come around to your way of thinking. So for a leader to lead change, they have to be aware of their own changes, how they're making them, and how to share them with others so they make it safe for others to go ahead and change as well. Humbug number 4. The transformation is a systemic process. I often say to my clients that you can't do systemic change systematically. And that frustrates a lot of them because that's what they're used to, is we come up with the approach and then we scale it quickly. And that's how we do something at scale in organizations. And I have an organization I'm working with now. And what we've identified is that we need to find bright spots in the organization where something interesting is happening, or we got a coalition of the willing, and we need to put more energy in small spots, building that change muscle, building that change culture right there in this small area. And once we have a handful of those, people start to ask questions. We also start to figure out how change works in that organizational context and where they're going from and where they're going to, because no one's starting at zero. They're starting with the organization they have. So transformation is really an individual sport. It's individual sport, and it's led by individuals, and then it's played by individuals in small groups and teams. And until small groups and teams and individuals develop a capacity to change, you can never develop an organizational capacity. This is too personal of a capability, so we have to build it person by person, team by team. That's the only way to make it scale across an organization. Number 5. You start by instituting new beliefs to drive change. This is one of my favorites, because if you think back to the last time that you changed a belief, you're going to have to think back a long ways. We can change perceptions, we can make assumptions about something and see that it wasn't true, but fundamental beliefs about what people should do, how the world operates, what's right, what's wrong, the things that we've come to believe about our skills and capacity, be they positive or negative, all these beliefs are very, very, very hard to change. In fact, if you look at the research around belief, you can take someone who has a strong belief, say a political or a moral or a religious belief, even a medical belief, and you can sit them down and show them all the evidence that proves their belief wrong. And generally, the only thing that happens in their brain is their belief gets a little stronger. We cannot talk people out of beliefs. They're not logical things. They are things that are often unseen. They're the water we swim in, and so we don't even know they're there. And so one of the things that we have to do with change is a couple of things. First, we have to begin to see our beliefs before we can address them. And the only really way to see our assumptions and our beliefs is by changing behaviors. So we'll talk about that as we go on here, but the easiest behavior to change is asking questions. You ask new questions, that's a new behavior, and that can be the catalyst you need to start to both uncover and see beliefs. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Humbug number 6. Telling people clearly what they do so they can execute shows change leadership. And again, I'm going back to the role of the leader here quite a bit. We start about it's cultivating the bricklayers, and it's also about you and your individual change. This one is really about saying that we have to stop with the telling and we have to start with the asking and the inquiry. And this is not something that is a practiced skill for most leaders. We have worked far too long on the expedient route of let's just tell people what to do, as opposed to letting them grow into the job and make the decisions for themselves, because they're not going to make some that are quite maybe as good as we would have made, but they need to get to the point where they can make just as good of decisions, if not better, because we're not going to be in that context with them. So again, asking questions is one of the most powerful tools we have. It's also one that we're not comfortable with because it doesn't let our expertise or our knowledge shine. And so we have to really get comfortable with driving dialogue if we're going to drive change in organizations. And the last one is that when it comes to change, Winning organizations need to be best in class. I'm so tired, honestly, of the phrase best in class. I never really liked it. But I like this phrase better in class, and I'll tell you why. I like it because what it says is I'm not worried about being the best. I'm not worried about measuring myself against others. I'm concerned about measuring the fact that I'm growing and progressing every day from where I'm at. And we do have to remember this in the organizations, again, that we work with. People will come to me and they'll say, what's the best way to do this in any organization? I'll say there is no best way to do it in any organization. There's only a better way to do it in your organization. And that's different because every organization, for the most part, comes fully formed. It reminds me of, I had the pleasure of getting to know fairly well and working with Tony Hsieh, who founded Zappos before he passed away so untimely. And we were doing a workshop once when I worked for another company. We had a big group of probably about 20 senior executives been handpicked to be in this little roundtable session. And one of the individuals turned to him and he says, "Okay, let's say I buy it. Let's say I believe that what you've done with how you made this culture so malleable and flexible and self-directed and all this stuff is absolutely the way that an organization should work. How do I make that happen in my organization?" And Tony kind of looked down, he looked real thoughtful, and everyone leaned forward. They're like, this is exciting. This guy who's done this and created this organization is going to tell us how to do it. And he goes, "I don't know, man, that sounds really hard." And everybody started laughing. And he said, but you have to remember, we didn't have to change this organization. This is the one we built from scratch. But most organizations aren't that way. Most times we're dealing with transformation because something has to change from what's established. And so all we have to do is we have to get better each day. We have to change and evolve a little bit, but be better in class and be a little bit every day and don't worry about being best in class. So those are the 7 humbugs, and I'm going to give you these few comments to leave us with, and then we'll go into the questions. But why do I say that change is a dialogic process? Because we've talked about this, behaviors change beliefs, not the other way around. And the easiest behaviors to change are the questions we ask and answer. If we can introduce those new behaviors in and what they cause, what they are catalyst for, then we can start to see things. So the good questions, as point number 3 says, gets to the heart of things. They uncover working assumptions, beliefs that we have that we're working on without even thinking about or reflecting on, just assuming are true day in and day out. And if we don't look at what we believe to be true, then we'll never not believe it because we're not aware that we're even believing it. We have to actually look at that belief and be able to put it in front of us and then say, is this serving us as well as it used to? Or if not, what does that mean? And it's when you can look at that belief and talk about it and then start to let some of the disconfirming information, I think is how Kurt Lewin put it, the things that say that might not be quite true, emerge, then we can examine and maybe think about changing that belief. But it takes a long time and a lot of conversation for us to convince ourselves that that belief needs to change. So you can't change into something new unless you know where you really are right now. And all this means that that role of leadership, as I said, has radically changed, that we have to be, as leaders, regardless of what functional or technical area we're responsible for, we have to be good question asking, better in class, individually out there changing and sharing that, change leaders, if our organization has any chance of transforming in the way that we want it to. So instead of I drive the vision, I believe a leader's mindset must become I create the space for things to emerge. Now, this is not, my thinking. I think that one of the best ways that we can look at that is from, my friend Clay Christensen, who passed away a couple of years ago. But questions are the places in your mind where answers fit. If you haven't asked the question, the answer has nowhere to go. So what we're trying to do as leaders, especially if we're leading change and transformation, but I think regardless of what's going on, is we are asking the questions that create the space for the answers that our people have to go. And maybe for where our answers can go as well, but we're not the only one that has those answers. We can't be if we're going to, change and adapt quickly enough. So that's really kind of the show and tell portion of what I'm going to do here. The six capabilities of change I list here in this last slide, and they are in the book, and I will certainly send you this material so you have them. And in the book, there are 31 questions that Katie referred to, which are those behavior changes I speak about to activate change. And one of the things that we'll do when we're done here is we will send you a link to the folks here, I guess, that are a part of the program, and you'll be able to download a template for free that shows you all of those questions and shows you exactly how to ask them and what to do with them when you do ask them, and builds upon what's in the book. So you'll have that tool to work with, and hopefully that will be useful, which, as we started with, I find to be very important. So on that note, Katie, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share there. And turn it back over to you and see what questions we have from the group.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael. Really, really appreciate that. In a moment, I will hand over to Emma and Lee to sort of kickstart those questions. In the meantime, just a reminder to everybody else that is listening live, do pop your questions into the chat and we can ask those directly to Michael. And as a reminder as well, so not only will we get that fantastic template that Michael mentioned if you are a member of the EX Space, but Kogan Page, our friends at Kogan Page, the publishers of Michael's book, have also said that they will give us a discount code for EX Space members as well, so you can buy the book in its entirety, and it is a really, really good read. So okay, so Emma, Lee, who shall I come to first? Is anyone desperate for it? Go on, Emma, go on. I'll go with you first.
Right.
I can tell you've been writing your questions down, so I'll pass to you first.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Michael. That was fantastic. And so many parts of what you said resonated so strongly with the work that we do and ideas, etc. And I could ask so many questions. I mean, I think first of all, just to say, I love the way you make this really practical and apply for people, which, to transform, you have to do that right. And I'm always fascinated. I actually started my career in world of academia, and then fell into the corporate world kind of accidentally. And I was amazed at the gap between kind of academia and the real world. And then I kind of, as I kind of got into it, I kind of got it, because academia is an ivory tower, right? And I think any tools and resources like you have developed here, which just take that really great, rich thinking but make it really accessible for people, is just so powerful. And I guess sort of linked to that, I'm going to go to humbug number one, first of all. I can go through all of them. I'm going to start with number one, though. And this massive disconnect between this, as you said, it wasn't a deliberate kind of, it's not deliberate bad practice, it's just a misplaced assumption, which is change is all about the systems and the tech, etc. And I'd just really like to explore with you why we know it's not right. We know it's not. We know it has to be human. We know that change has to happen unless people change the way they do things, right? You can have the best systems in the world, etc., etc. It's not going to happen. So absolutely with you on that. But I feel this frustration with, like, are we still, these companies still thinking that transformation is about the tech and the process, because they still are. And I feel like banging my head against a brick wall. I've got a hypothesis on this. I'd love to explore it with you. And my hypothesis is, I think that people feel quite overwhelmed by change, and it's big and scary. And my background is in psychology, so perhaps I'm a little bit more okay with it. And I wonder if going for the tech, right, putting, I don't know, a process in place or a piece of software gives people the illusion of, I'm doing something. Tick, yes, I've got that new system, or I've got that new app, or we've done this, or even we've surveyed people, and it kind of gives people the illusion of doing something, and they don't want to really, they've almost kind of doing this when you sort of say, yeah, but it's not going to work unless we really look at the human side of it, because it's people that change, right? But I wondered what you thought about why we are still seeing this really big challenge when it comes to get into the heart of this, which is it's about people, it's about human beings. So I'd love to hear your views on that.
Yeah, I certainly think there's a lot in what you have to say, and there's probably a lot of ways to look at it, but I think that you do have to look at it, psychologically or human nature wise. And I don't mean this to sound negative, but I do believe that most behaviors stem from shame, fear, and the desire to avoid both of those. We don't want to be ashamed, and we don't want to be afraid. We are a species that is literally built to survive. And what's interesting is as we go through, life in our modern day organizations, we're no longer, out in the wasteland hunting for food to survive. We have a very different life nowadays, but we still have a basic brainstem that's looking to survive. And the thing that feels, besides actual death, that feels most like death in our society is losing your position in that society, your job, your role, whatever it is you've accomplished. And so we do not, our organizations and our hopes and fears around our jobs do not generally lead to bravery and sticking your neck out, because we see what happens, and we've created organizations that are trying to stay safe. I was talking to someone the other day about the metrics in their business, and I said, look, what's interesting is you guys are talking about all the change and transformation you want to undergo. Now I'm looking at your metrics, and you're going to get bonused on doing things that you already know how to do. So how are you going to change and innovate? I mean, you've created a system that reinforces itself, and you're not willing to take on things that you don't know how to do. You're not willing to risk, and we've built systems that don't have risk built into them. So for me, I think that's one of the biggest issues. And so we go back to the things that we're like hoping will solve the problems. And like all kids, it's wonderful when Mr. Wizard comes along and magic solves the problem. We all love to think about magic as kids. And even as adults, we probably still go to the Harry Potter films, but we love magic because we love a magic solution. Technology seems like a magic solution. And it's like, that'll fix everything. And we won't have to do anything different. We won't have to change our behaviors. We won't have to unlearn. We won't have to recognize that what we know has less value. All those things that the change threatens about our survival are taken away when we focus on the change being about something else and not about us. It's unmooring in the world to have to change. I preach change. I work with organizations changing all the time. And yet when I have something that I'm struggling with that I do poorly, I have my little keyboard behind me here, and I take lessons. And I take lessons and I take lessons all the time, and I make mistakes, and I have to do it because I have to remind myself to stay in a place where I remember to be humble about my need to change. If I don't, then I'm going to get so comfortable in that place of knowing that that's the only one I'm used to if I'm not comfortable with that place of unknowing. So does that address it at all for you?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That was really great. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think we could run a whole webinar just on that humbug alone, right? Because it's
Probably.
I'm fascinated by it, and fascinated by the whole field of behavior change. And I've worked in it myself many years as well. So it's just it's never boring, is it? Let's face it. I don't want to hog the floor, so I'm going to hand over to Lee to ask a question, and then I think we've got some from the floor as well. So Lee, hand over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, just to reflect what everyone else has said already, great book. Probably my single most highlighted book in the last 5 years, which is always a good sign. So lots of great stuff, highly recommended. I'm really interested in your thoughts around communication as a function and the role that communicators play in supporting change. So I think you talked about moving away from this assumption that we've got to tell and sell change to more of a dialogue. And that's a very different style of communication. Often when we do big transformations within big business in particular, we roll out the communication work stream, and there's 1,000,001 communicators. There's a big campaign, there's graphics, there's icons, there's logos, you name it. Where does that fit within your philosophy of change and transformation?
Boy, it's a great question, Lee. The communication is difficult because, and you're right, most times it ends up being, just a propaganda machine, and maybe a benign or somewhat benign one, but that's what our communication ends up being is, hey, here's the new beliefs. Everyone's on board. Why aren't you? And we spend so much time because we think that if we tell people enough what it is, that they'll say, oh, I understand it now, and a switch will flip. And we forget that even the people who are putting those communications out, had to go on a journey. And there's this line of starting with this new thing doesn't exist, to we're aware of it, to we're unsure of it, till we fight it, we're against it, and all of a sudden we work it through. Okay, we're at that point now. And then we want everybody else to jump to that point immediately and not go through their own journey, because we've quite frankly taken so much darn time getting here that whatever it is we needed to change, now we're under the gun to change, so we want to roll it out. We need to give people the time to have those doubts and those same things from their perspective and their role. And we don't want to do it, and we just keep hoping that if we market it hard enough, everyone will buy it. And you know, you can market things to the point where a lot of people buy them, but do they last in the marketplace? You know, do they resonate? Do they have, you know, staying power? That's the question. So I think when it comes to that communication, we do have people that are, again, sort of taking the easy way out of, here's the new truth. As long as we communicate it to everyone, then they'll all believe it, as opposed to, how do we engage in the dialogue? Because if we engage in the dialogue, and if we're not saying that the new thing is a foregone conclusion, then we feel like we've given up control over whether or not the change will actually happen. But, you know, if we have a direction we're going, we have leadership behind that, we will move in that direction sooner or later. And sometimes that means that new people will come in, and, you know, old people will go out of the organization. That's okay, but we have to engage in that more difficult conversation. A friend of mine said, if you want to, you know, you have to lose control to gain engagement. And I think that is the hard part that our communications teams don't want to let people know, is that what they need to do is be creating a series of dialogues and listening to what's happening, knowing that over time, it's not going to take really any less time. And it's the way it's going to get you to a place of shared belief faster. But for there to be shared belief, people have to share their unbelief first. And that's what we don't really allow for, I guess, in my view, in our communications.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that really resonates with me. And there's an author, you may have come across him, Leandro Herrero, and he uses a term, tsunami change, which I love. And it's this sense that, you know, we just wash it over the entire organization, and that's meant to do the job. And actually, you know, he talks about tsunami change and then butterfly change, and it's almost, you know, it's a very different focus and a different kind of dialogue. And yeah, absolutely, there's a lot of overlap, I think, between what you've said there and his views, and love that. One other thing, if I may, just quickly, the toolkit for transformation. So you know, we talk a lot within the world of employee experience around design thinking, service design, and the toolkit that comes with that. Where does that fit for you within this world? Is that a set of tools or methodologies that you can really utilize here to create that dialogue?
Well, I don't know that, you know, the way that I approach it is, and you'll see when you, in fact, I wonder if I even have, I don't think I have a screenshot of it here really available, so I'm not going to disrupt the flow. But what you'll see when you know, download the template we're going to share with people is, for those of you who've worked like with, you know, canvases where you kind of lay things out, when they originally started a lot with software design and product design. What I've done is create a canvas that allows people to have the conversations. Because if you think about it, I've made this very, probably fairly, you know, it seems fairly, you know, facile, oversimplistic statement, just ask different questions. And here's 31 questions to ask. But it's not simply about asking questions. You really have to be thoughtful about how you operate as a question asker, how you set that question out, how you respond to the responses you get, how you engage, and what you do with that. And so that's what the template is really about. It's about bringing some science behind the art of dialogue and asking questions, and bringing some repetitiveness that into the organization, so it becomes practice. So for example, I have an organization I'm working with now, and they're trying to build changes of capability. So what we're doing is not going in and doing workshops across the organization. We're having an initial discussion that we had that is somewhat like this one with their leadership team, to talk through these ideas, these principles, and to say, what do you think? Does this actually make sense, maybe as a way to approach this, to get that alignment? And once we have that, we're just taking a handful of spots in the organization. And as they go through their workday, as they're making decisions in whatever ways they do and the mechanisms they work, we're inserting, using, asking, and answering some of these questions into those day-to-day processes that already exist, into the context and the business or the purpose that they're already in, a mission that they're already engaged in. And that way we actually see how well they work, how they have to adapt and change. And we start getting a good change dialogue going in that group or team. And then we expand it from there. So, you know, for me, those are really the tools. The rest of the tools of change that we have that are out there that are well known, sometimes they can be very, useful and helpful if we don't rely on them, I guess. So I'm not sure if I quite answered your question though. Was I on the right track there?
No, again, that absolutely resonates. I think the focus on questions as well is, I think, really refreshing. Thank you.
Yeah, just
Katie, Emma.
Just to jump in there with the questions piece. I mean, I always say this. I've done lots of learning in my time, Michael. I'm a lifelong nerd, and I'm ex-academic, etc. And I always say the single most useful piece of learning I ever did was my coaching training years ago when I was first a line manager. I got really lucky to work for a company that were years ahead of their time, and they had to fly someone in from Australia to give us a 2-day course. So I latterly then went and kind of trained as an accredited coach, but I can honestly say those 2 days changed my life in terms of opening me up to the art of asking great questions. And it's very I think people underplay the skill that there is behind asking a great question, right? And it was, I could ask a question, but to ask the right question, or a question is really going to get under the skin, I think is something you never get to the point where you go, right, I've done it, I'm there. You're always learning all the time. So I absolutely advocate for that. And I think it's going back to that psychological safety piece. In my experience, giving line managers a few questions to ask, in whatever capacity. We use a question called the best experience question a lot, which is just, as a line manager, ask your people, tell me about a time you had your best ever experience at work. It's a really easy question. And they go, hey, I can do that. And so I love your kind of wisdom of just make it easy for people to do this. Make it so it's not too overwhelming and too scary. Give them some help, and then start to see changes happen. So absolutely advocate that. And yeah, love it. All over.
And you made a comment, I think, at the beginning about it seemed like more, coach-like. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's very much what this is. And if you think about that, why a coach-like leader is so powerful is because people who have some skill or experience at coaching have learned that to really be helpful to someone, they have to stay in a place of ambiguity and not knowing, and they have to be okay with that. Just asking some questions, not knowing what the immediate answer is, not knowing how it's going to turn out, not knowing how they're going to add value, just creating a space for someone else, their coaching client at this point, to figure it out. Well, that's the same thing we're doing with our teams. We're creating space for them to have the conversation. We're making it safe for them to have that conversation, for them to explore what they don't know and what they're not good at yet, and what their hopes and fears are about something. And so that coach-like leader is, and I do see more of a call for that to some extent in organizations. What I don't think we've accommodated yet, maybe this kind of links back to Lee's last question, I don't think we've accommodated though all of our kind of working systems to really facilitate coach-like leadership. We're starting to teach it in some places. I've worked at places like Microsoft has made a big investment in doing this. What I don't know is, but the way they make the decisions and measure things then, is that caught up with that same view of a coach-like leader? Because there are more implications, and it means we have to move more and more into places of unpredictability and ambiguity. And one of the things that we've done in our organizations is try and legislate the unpredictability out of them. Nobody wants there to be any unpredictability. But it also means that, oftentimes the only places we get huge growth in companies are the brand new ones that we didn't predict. Regular companies that are established just don't take off again, unless they have a transformation. Usually they just kind of stagnate and move along. And so we're asking the organization to embrace something that it's built to reject. And that's really challenging.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm going to hand back to Katie now, because I know we've got a few questions coming on the chat. So over to you, Katie. Thank you for that, Michael.
Thanks. Yeah, that's brilliant. So I've got a question here from Jermaine. Jermaine, if you did want to come off mute to expand on it, you're welcome to do so. No pressure either way. But the question here is, what are your thoughts on looking at change from two lenses, human capability and business capability?
Oh, Jermaine, you always ask good questions. I think that my only response to that would be is that it has to be a human capability first before it can become a business capability. Really, if you think about any organization's capability, I love it when we talk about organizations, because if we're being, we're going to be picky about it here. Organizations don't exist. You know, there's buildings and there's names and there's contracts, but the organization is simply that group of people with some sort of shared, you know, purpose, moving in a direction to produce, do, or sell something. But the organization itself, with you take the individuals away, there's nothing left. And so that's what's really tricky about organizations, is we start to think of them as if they exist somewhere in the ether on their own, you know, and they don't. They change every day with the lives of every single person in them. And we have to really go back and say, if that's the case, I need to focus on the individuals, which is why I say this change is an individual game, you know, played in small groups. And the only thing that makes an organization is those individuals and those small groups are playing by a shared set of beliefs and or rules that keeps them together, you know. So we have to start with change, and even just being a human thing, and realizing that, and not thinking that the human beings are fungible to the organization and its success. They're not. They're what makes it. But we oftentimes, you know, that gets lost, because we can pluck individuals out of an organization, take them out of it, and the organization still exists and is moving and going along. So it starts to feel like it's something that exists on its own. And that's just one of the things we have to start to see through if we're going to actually change them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. And actually, your book drives that point home as well, that, you know, organizations don't change companies, people do. And that's why, to me, looking at it from two lenses, I mean, the business drivers, obviously, you know, they drive the agenda, and maybe can be better controlled by the executives. But to get individuals, as you say, to buy in and to really see the benefit and the impact on them, it's a huge plus if we can do it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, by the way, you should follow my friend Jermaine on LinkedIn. And he has a book that he is working on writing right now that'll be coming out around kind of what some of these heart-led leaders are like and what they do and his experiences with them. So we will look forward to seeing that, Jermaine.
Thank you, Michael. I actually have a statement in there that's very relevant to this topic today. I say that you can't lead change if you can't lead people.
Very true.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And maybe we'll see Jermaine on a future expert insights session. So watch this space. So thank you. I've got another question here. We'll probably have time, or we may have time for one more. So if you do have any other burning questions, do pop them in the chat now. Another question here for you is around the when. So at what point should leaders start asking these questions? Should it be early on to get buy-in and then help to lead to better solutions?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to go right away. I had this, leaders just have to go first when it comes to change. There's just no other way around it. And I had this conversation with this prospective client yesterday. They'd reached out and they said, we're talking to, I said, so let me just be clear. There's only one thing that will get me to say you need to not work with me and you work with somebody else, is if you tell me that your leaders themselves don't need to be personally involved. And I said, we need to start with the leaders, the senior leadership team, all the way through, because people follow what they see, not what they're told. And I have seen the impact of leaders leading out loud, is the phrase that I use in some organizations. And, you know, standing up there and saying, I didn't know that, here's where I struggled with that. I'll give you an example. I was working with an organization going through a massive transformation, and we were meeting with a group of executives within it. They had multiple companies in there. It was a big conglomerate. and we'd created this little device for the conversation. And we had two things. One was an elephant. And if you know that phrase, there's an elephant in the room. You could take the elephant and put the elephant on the table so we could talk about it. So if you had something you thought that we were avoiding talking about, you could grab the little stuffed elephant. And the other one was a little donkey. And they said, what's a donkey for? I said, well, if you have a question that you think is going to make you feel like, an ass, then you can grab the donkey and it'll protect you. Which was a stupid juvenile thing to say, but everybody listens when you're at the front of the room. And we were in this dialogue, and all of a sudden, one of the leaders reached over. He goes, give me the donkey. And he grabs the donkey and he puts this death grip on it. And he goes, I don't fully understand platform as a service and how that's going to impact the business model in this case. And he's like winces and he puts it down. And the his peer from the other organization said, that's a great question. I struggled with that for months. And as soon as he said that, the death grip on the donkey was gone. The person listened, engaged. He said, you struggled through what I struggled through. I'm a senior executive, and I had to admit that I don't understand, I don't get it, and I know we're going this direction. You had empathy. You said you had the same thing. You humanized it for me. And they're able to have a really good dialogue and move that forward. And what's interesting to me is he was one of the bravest question askers. He was well known to grab the donkey. And that leader has gone on to run a major, European company and do very well at it, I think, because he is a question asking, stay curious kind of leader, but willing to say, here's what I don't know. And he's willing to say it in front of his entire team. And they don't find weakness in that. They find strength.
I love that. That's great. Thank you. That's such a great little easy, simple thing to implement as well, isn't it? And actually I was reflecting on one of your humbugs earlier on about the psychological safety and how it's all very well having those words on the wall about failing fast, but we've got to enable that. And I was kind of thinking, we always talk about it in the context of making our employees feel psychologically safe, and that leaders need to have that safety too. And how do you kind of implement that for them? How do you help them to get really comfortable? It's all very well sort of saying, they need to be comfortable. And how does that happen?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think the answer is one leader in one, question in one moment at a time. And that's one of the problems, is that we want to jumpstart. Basically, we want to sit around being crap at change and all of a sudden be experts at it. It's like, well, wait a minute. What practice, what work have you done? Where have you gotten? I see somebody's making a comment in the chat about, starting a band. They see my keyboard in the back, but I when I first started playing it, I couldn't move my hands even separately. If I moved this finger moved. It was a disaster. And now, I'm playing pieces that are more complicated, but there's still a long ways to go. I'm still in learning mode, and I'm going to be in learning mode. By the way, I'm still going to play while I'm learning. I'm not going to hide away in a room and not play in front of anybody else. I'm going to play while I'm learning, and I'm going to make mistakes in front of people. Well, that's what we have to do in our organizations, and we have to get used to that as a way of working. And so in teams, in meetings, in work scenarios, we have to be comfortable with examining what we did incorrectly or what we thought worked that didn't work. And it's what's interesting about, one of the things that's gone hand in hand with so much of the change and transformation, digital transformation, is talk about agile tools and things like that. And what is really interesting about, all of those tools is that they are very much about looking at things with a very clear eye, with not a lot of ego, and being okay with there being mistakes and errors and problems and insufficiencies, knowing that that's the road to getting something that works. And that whole, all the failures get you to the one that worked. That's something that we've embraced in, design of software and products, but we haven't implemented that near enough in just our mindset of everybody should be making some sort of mistake every day. Everybody should be wrong about something every day, and be talking about it, because that's the only way you can get better. And so, I tend to wax on about that, but with my individuals, I start with just my leaders. I start with, okay, here's an opportunity for you to lead out loud, and do so by being that curious, open, vulnerable leader in front of others. So we look for specific opportunities. We look for ones that aren't too scary and too painful, but are stretching them a little bit. And then we see how it goes. And then we do it again. And then we do it again. And then it gets easier and faster and better. But once again, it's one of those curves that's very, very slow until it takes off. And we're used to things that go like this, or else they're not sufficient to the task. But we have to be patient. We have to build it as a skill in ourselves. If I'm a leader, I want to build it in myself, and I might want some help around that. And then I want to build it in my immediate team. And then I want, as they go out, have a different experience and try and build it, they can come back and we're one step ahead of their team in learning it. And so we're just creating these groups that are learning, that are a little bit ahead of another group. So they're teaching that group. Pretty soon you have people that are still very much in the midst of learning, teaching, 7 different layers into the organization, and that's how it can take off and go viral. But it's a go slow to go fast.
Love it. Thank you so much. I'm really aware of the fact that we are coming very close to time. Just before I hand over to Lee, I'll let you close this one down. Just before I do that, just a reminder of some of the great things we've got coming up. Michael, we've actually closed our final sort of live event for 2023. So thank you very much. It's been an amazing year. We've had some fantastic guests on, and what a great way to finish. We have loads more lined up for 2024. The next one that you can sign up for is we have an event on, let me just double check the date on that. I know it's in January the 25th. We have Howard Gray on talking about the age of listening. In a moment, I will put the link to sign up for that event into the chat. We'll also have lots of other sort of great live events exclusive for our EX Space members, including our EX Clinic, which happens every single month. We've got some EX files, which are our fantastic case studies from people doing great things out there in the world of employee experience within organizations. And we've got some excellent guests lined up for February as well. I'm not going to put any spoilers out there yet, but there's definitely ones to watch there. So lots going on. Lee, I'm going to hand over to you to close, and I will put that link for Howard's talk into the chat. Before I do, just another huge thank you, Michael. That was a really great session. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Lee, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. And yeah, Michael, thanks so much for that. I think, you know, a great book, so many themes that are so relevant to what we're about from an EX perspective. And it really did help join the dots for a lot of things: psychological safety, emotions, being human-centered, listening, questions, just so rich. So brilliant session. I think Chuck has been doing the advertising for us, so thank you, Chuck, for bigging up the EX space. But for those of you that haven't had a look behind the scenes, please let us know if you'd like to. We could spend 15-20 minutes maximum, give you a really quick personal guided tour of the EX space and the tools and learning that is contained within it. So please reach out if you'd like to take a closer look. And onwards and upwards, looking forward to a great 2024. Thanks to everyone for dialing in and joining today. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon.